welcome back to Coloring Through the Bible. My name is Keegan Harkins, and we're taking just one more look at the Exodus chapter 23. We've kind of been talking about this the last two daily devotionals that we've done. This will be the last video on Exodus chapter 3, I promise, but I wanted to take just a little bit of time to talk about the last two verses of this chapter. It's a really strong warning, and it was directed to the Israelites as they were about to enter into their promised land. God is telling them in verses 32 and 33, and let me just read it to you real quick. Do not make a covenant with them or with their gods, with the people who already live in the land. Okay? Do not let them live in your land, or they'll cause you to sin against me, because the worship of their gods will certainly be a snare to you. So the people that we live with, the people that we are in covenant with, the people that we share our lives with, they impact our souls. And this is the warning of these two verses. Now, yes, it was a warning to the Israelites, hey, drive out the people that are in the land. We know that they did not do that, and what God said actually happened. They enticed the Israelites to worshiping their false gods, and they led them away from the Lord. But I don't think that this is a lesson that we should put in history and leave there. This is a warning to us today, just as much as it was to them. Maybe not the, drive people from your life part, but the be conscious of who you settle with. And not just who you live with, who you marry, who you date, but who you become friends with, who you allow to impact your life. And that could even be books we read, television shows we watch, movies we watch, churches we go to even. I mean, there's just a huge impact of the way that the people we surround ourselves with, they impact us, and they can become a trap or they can become a treasure. They can be somebody who lifts us up and draws us closer to the Lord, or somebody that pulls us away. Now, 1 Corinthians 15, chapter 33, puts it this way: do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. It is a fact. Now, does that mean that we should cut ourselves off from society? I mean, I think it would be far easier if we lived in this beautiful deserted island kind of place where we could live in peace and harmony, and there would just be beauty and sharing and love. We'd never get our feelings hurt, or we'd never be tempted to sin. But that's just not realistic. I mean, and I get why people have attempted to maybe cloister themselves up so that they could focus on God. But as tempting as that sounds some days, especially when my feelings have been hurt or I'm struggling with something, I can't help but wonder how useful we could possibly be if we never interacted with the world. See, a light bulb gives off light in the dark, but if nobody is in the room to see it, does it even matter? As Christians, we're called to model our behavior to that of Jesus. And if he's our guide for how to live, we can use his life as an example of how we should live. I mean, he could easily have come to earth and he could have settled himself down in the temple on an earthly throne. He could have taught the lessons that he taught from the safety and the comfort of the company of only religious leaders and only holy people of his day. But he didn't. I mean, yes, he taught in the temple and in the synagogues, and he had many conversations and moments of instructions with people we would describe as righteous or holy, but he did not distance himself from the low and the shameful. He didn't compromise his beliefs either. He remained true and pure and holy while reaching down into the world of the lost and leading them into the light. And when the Pharisees saw that Jesus was hanging around sinners, they were totally appalled. But Jesus responded to them in Matthew 9, verse 12. Jesus says, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick." Now, there is a difference between caring for the sick and sharing their tissue. That's kind of gross, but think about it. I mean, life would be a lot easier if we never had to face hatred or ridicule for our faith, but a faith that's isolated can never move mountains. We need to care for the sick. But if we're using their tissue, then we are wrapping ourselves up in and participating in their sin or the things that God says is not holy. And that is what's dangerous. That's where we get pulled away from the truth. Just like if you were to use the same tissue as somebody who's sick, you're going to get their sickness. And that's what these two chapters are kind of talking about. So Jesus sent us into the world, but he commanded us to be separate at the same time. And maybe it sounds like a contradiction, but there is a subtle difference. Now, if you mix oil and vinegar together, they become one. I mean, they fill up the same glass. They are all the liquid, inside this glass. But the oil remains intact, not diluted by the water. They appear like little droplets that are surrounded, included, and intertwined floating in the water, but they're unique. You could suck out just that little droplet of oil and it's 100% oil. It has not been diluted by the water. It has not been compromised. And the same is true of us. We are in the world. We are floating around with it. We're mixing with it. But we need to hold on to our integrity so that we aren't compromised, so that we aren't diluted by the sins of the world. We don't start to think that things that are sin, that God says in his word, these things are sin. And the world says, oh, they're not bad. Everyone's doing it. Or it's not a big deal. It's legal. It's what everybody does. Well, just because the world says that's what we can do, and just because it's legal, and just because it's something that a lot of people are doing, doesn't mean that we should compromise our faith, our belief, or the rule of our life to accommodate those things that society has pulled away from God. We need to mix with the world without compromising and diluting our faith. Jesus compared believers to salt. Now, salt is a very powerful substance. It has the ability to keep meat from spoiling. It adds flavor. And if you live, I live in Montana, we get lots and lots of snow. Ice is so important for melting ice and keeping us safe when everything gets icy and cold. It cleans wounds. If you have a sore throat or a canker sore, you can gargle with salt water and it'll hurt, but it'll heal it. It cleans it. It's incredibly useful. And Jesus taught in Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth. I mean, just think about that. We are meant to be useful, not just something that's pretty and put on a shelf, not just something that has value, but something that is useful. We're intended to bring about change in everything we come in contact with. But Jesus doesn't just end there. The whole verse says, you are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. There's a real warning in losing our saltiness, in losing our uniqueness, in mingling and diluting ourselves with society's ideals and the things that they say are okay, and the movies that they say that are okay, the behaviors that the world around us says are okay. We need to look honestly at our lives and make sure that we aren't losing our saltiness. And if we are, maybe we need to look at the company we're keeping. Have we become like God warned the Israelites in Exodus 23? Have we allowed the world and its idols to draw our attention away from God? But let's not stop there. Let's examine what type of friend we are. Are we urging each other towards Christ? Or are we holding people back? Are we diluting the company that we keep? Let's be oily today and a whole lot salty. We are in the world, but not affected by the world. We're adding flavor to the world. And we are mixing with the world without sharing the tissue. I hope you've been encouraged today, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. From all of us here at Hebrews 4 Ministries, have a truly blessed day.